welcome. If you're new here, this is the Air Hug Community Podcast, and my name is Judy Arazosa. I am your host and virtual cheerleader. I would like to thank you for popping in and giving your time to a little listen here today. And just so you know, our goal here is to gear you up for a better day, a better week, a better month, and a better year. So here on the Air Hug Community, we focus on stories from guests and myself that touch on living well from your 20s all the way up until age 100. And let's not even limit it there. We cover all topics related to physical and emotional health. And a lot of the topics we cover are generated from Q&A sessions I have with my clients and also with conversations that I have with my BFFs on our walks that we love to take to stay connected. Okay, quick announcement, friends, before we get going. I went back and looked at this, and there's going to be some phone ringing in here. And just as an FYI, at the time of this recording, we are expecting grand twins in our family. And so I'm just hesitate to turn my ringer off. And I did notice that while we were recording this episode, the phone did ring. I know, I just want to know in case anything happens, but everything's okay. And so let's hop to it. I'm super, super excited about our conversation today. Welcome back, everybody. I'm super, super excited today to introduce our guest. And I know I say that every time, but I have never met anyone quite like this. And we just found out chatting before we got on her that we're actually from the same area, not the same town, but the same region of New York State. And how funny is that? So today we are talking to a board certified retired OBGYN turned chef and cooking instructor. And she is the founder of the Brain Health Kitchen Culinary School. And I think it's probably the only one of its kind. It's focused on fending off age-related cognitive decline. Am I right? I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so this is Dr. Annie Fenn. And so welcome. I am thrilled to have you on here. Let me just start right off. How do you go from being an OBGYN to operating a very unique cooking school?
Well, it is a little different. I would say that my path is an example of what happens when you just really follow your passion, but you don't really know where that passion is going to take you. You know, I loved being an OBGYN doctor. I did it for more than 20 years. I absolutely loved it. But 20 years in, I just felt like I needed a change. I was itching to use a different part of my brain. And I'd always loved to cook. I'd always cooked since high school extensively and obsessed over recipes and food. And so one of my dreams was to go to culinary school. So that's what I did. I retired from my practice. I was in my mid-40s when that happened. My patients were shocked, but I did it. And I went to study in Italy. I studied in Mexico. I studied at the Culinary Institute of America just to get some skills because I was really curious about how healthy eating can become easier for people and how to make healthy food taste better. Because I felt like that was really the root of a lot of the illnesses that my patients had had. So I came back from culinary school and I just started teaching cooking classes in my community. And around that time, I had a mother who was diagnosed with. So I took a really deep dive into what do the studies show about nutrition and preventing Alzheimer's disease, preventing dementia. How can you slow down the course of the disease if you already have it? And what is the role of the food play in that? And back in 2015, there was enough data to show.
Oops, excuse me for just a minute. Because you cut out for a minute when you said your mom's diagnosis, but I'm guessing it was Alzheimer's.
My mom was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment,
okay,
which is an early stage of Alzheimer's.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then,
Yeah.
okay, so just to jump back in, for some reason it cut out for a minute, but that happens, right?
No worries.
Oh my goodness. So that stirred your interest about wanting to know more.
Yeah. And in 2015, there was actually enough scientific data for me to put together a program where this was what I was doing exclusively. It was teaching people how to eat better to prevent age-related cognitive decline. And that's when I founded the cooking school called Brain Health Kitchen. Brain Health Kitchen is also a community. It's an online community. It's a newsletter community. It's just a group of people that are proactive about aging and taking care of their brains.
That is so fascinating. And you also wrote in your thing that you like to make food delicious while also being healthy. So that is right up our alley. And so, I think I'll automatically of the Mediterranean diet, which is delicious anyway. And I think at some point you have made reference to it. What was it like?
Absolutely.
Being in cooking school you said Italy and Mexico, right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
So
what was it like?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was wonderful. I was in Tuscany and I worked in kitchens of home cooks. I wasn't studying from restaurant chefs. I was studying from home cooks in Italy. And, in Italy, especially in Tuscany, they are very good at making vegetables taste amazing. And so I was most interested in learning what kind of techniques they used with olive oil and with whole food ingredients to make vegetarian dishes so good. Because the Mediterranean diet, if you've all probably seen the Mediterranean diet pyramid, which is basically a plant-based diet primarily, at the bottom of that pyramid is, fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and olive oil and things like that. And then as you go up the pyramid, there's smaller portions of things like poultry and dairy. They emphasize fish and seafood. There's not so much meat. There's not so much sweets or processed foods. So the Mediterranean diet, the bulk of it really is a plant-based diet. So what I learned in Italy was how to make things delicious using brain healthy cooking techniques. Like not frying food, not searing food, not applying too much heat to it, which we can talk about.
I would love, I'd love to talk about heat. Yeah, because I'm an impatient cook. I like really good food, but I sometimes think like, oh, well, if it's hotter, maybe be ready sooner. But you talked a little bit about, can you elaborate on why that's not a good idea?
Yes, and it's never an all or nothing thing, but the brain healthy cooking techniques that I teach at the cooking school rely on applying heat low and slow. So yes, there can be a tendency when you're in a hurry to sear something in a pan or put it on a super hot grill just to get dinner on the table faster. And that's okay every once in a while. But most of the food that you're preparing should be cooked at low heat, ideally in the presence of some sort of liquid like braising or poaching or steaming. And that helps lock in the nutrients. It keeps things like, say, when you're cooking salmon, it keeps the omega-3 fatty acids from seeping out, or the vitamin D in the fish from seeping out. The high heat methods tend to do that. The other thing the high heat methods do is they can create inflammatory particles in the food. And these particles have been associated with Alzheimer's disease. They actually accumulate in the brain cells of people who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So we want to avoid creating any of these particles. They're called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs.
Okay, I was going to ask you.
To prevent that.
Okay. All right, you've convinced me. And actually, you put up a beautiful picture on the Brain Health Kitchen, a lot of beautiful recipes, but you put up one that really spoke to me with cod and tomatoes and chickpeas. And then there was a discussion, another discussion. I don't know if it was that post or a different one about using olive oil at low heat. And then if you do have to raise the heat, switching to avocado oil.
Yes. And that's such an important point, Judy, because, olive oil is the primary cooking oil in the Mediterranean diet. It's also the only cooking oil that's recommended in the MIND diet study, which is a spinoff of the Mediterranean diet to make it more brain specific and brain healthy. But olive oil is wonderful for the brain for a couple reasons. Number one, it contains the right amount of fat. These are the monounsaturated fatty acids. These are what I like to think of as the brain-friendly fats, the fats that your brain really needs for nutrients and also for the absorption of all the nutrient-dense foods that you eat. Okay. And the other thing olive oil contains, the other oils do not have for the most part, are polyphenols. and polyphenols are potent antioxidants. So when you cook with olive oil, and you should cook with it, because I want people to use olive oil as their primary oil, but avoid heating it up past 375 degrees Fahrenheit, for example, because you may damage those delicate polyphenols.
Okay, so not only are you damaging, let's say if it's salmon or whatever, but you're actually damaging the oil as well above that temperature.
Yes.
Okay.
And this gets down to one of the essential fats in the brain healthy diet are the omega-3 fatty acids, which everyone has heard of, right? You know, there's basically three: DHA, EPA, and ALA. But the ones that are really crucial to brain health because they protect brain cells as they age, that's DHA. And so whenever you're cooking like fish and seafood, which is rich in DHA, you want to use these methods so that those omega-3 fatty acids don't become, deteriorated, because that's what you need, and they're most bioavailable through foods.
Okay. Yeah. What's the point of destroying them if we're going through the effort to buy that beautiful piece of fish, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you mentioned avocado oil, which is my first choice if I'm going to actually sear something in a pan, or let's say I'm roasting Brussels sprouts at 400 degrees and I want them to get really nice and crispy, then I would use avocado oil. And another trick you can do is you can mix avocado and olive oil so that you get the flavor of the olive oil, because avocado has got a very neutral flavor, but still have more heat tolerance than the olive oil would have.
Oh, I never thought you could do that. Okay, pretty cool. I have to admit, like for the longest time, I would rely on cooking spray, and I'm getting away from that and actually like tossing my vegetables with real oil. And I've been like, ever since I started following, I'm like, wait, which oil do I use? And now you've made it very clear. But those are the two oils that are in my kitchen. And I mean, I don't even know what's in those cooking sprays, even though they say whatever they are.
Yeah, there's one avocado oil spray I use sometimes. If you just look at the ingredient list and there's really nothing else on it, then it's fine.
Then it's okay.
But I think with cooking oils, people get so confused with cooking oils, but I like to make it really simple. The brain-friendly oils are olive oil, avocado oil, and a couple other ones, and that's it. And all the other ones, you might want to use them occasionally, like say sesame oil gives foods a certain flavor. Coconut oil gives food a certain flavor, but they're also really high in saturated fats and some inflammatory substances like omega-6 fatty acids. So you really want to limit the use of those types of oils in your cooking.
Okay. Oh, that clears it up. And that's really cool. So when you started learning all these cooking techniques, where did you go first? Let me ask you that. Italy or Mexico?
I spent 2 different stints in cooking schools in Mexico, in central Mexico. One was in San Miguel de Allende. The other one was in Tepoztlan. And both of these are mountainous communities. They don't eat a lot of meat. They don't eat a lot of fish and seafood. They actually are vegetable centric. And they eat a lot of legumes. They eat a lot of seasonal vegetables, a lot of rice. And, they make food taste amazing. They have all the chilies and the different regional foods that put their stamp on it. It's a very brain healthy diet.
How interesting that they're so similar and so far apart. Right? Just little pockets of the world.
It's interesting because, and a lot of the landlocked communities are like that, the mountainous communities, because they don't have access to a lot of meat or fish and seafood. And so they often rely on plant-based foods.
That they just do it. So what, do you have a favorite dish from each of those places?
Oh, from Mexico. What I learned to make in Mexico was like how to make really good salsa verde, which everyone knows you can buy in a jar. But if you go to the grocery store and you buy tomatillos, which every grocery store has, this is like this little green tomato-like vegetable. It's actually a fruit, but it's so rich in oxidants and vitamins like vitamin C. And what I learned was that you just roast them until they're a little bit blistered, and then you throw them in a blender with your onions, your garlic, your peppers, your salt, whatever else to make the salsa verde. And it's a really wonderful, clean, easy sauce. You can use just about everything.
So delicious. I used to belong to a CSA that had them, and I was like, Okay, I need to learn what to do with them. And and we had to pick them ourselves. That was kind of fascinating. I went from not ever
Yes.
knowing what they were to actually picking them off a vine and figuring out how to use them. So that's pretty cool. And what about in Italy? Did you come away with a favorite dish from Tuscany?
You know, I'll be honest. When I was in Tuscany, I spent a lot of time learning how to make pasta.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I still make pasta. I make a lot of pasta, but I veer more towards the plant-based versions that have a lot more nutrient density. Say like butternut squash gnocchi I
Mm.
make, and I also have a gluten-free gnocchi I make made with chestnut flour and chickpea flour and things like that. So I'm always trying to replace ingredients in the Brain Health Kitchen that are devoid of nutrients, say like all-purpose white flour, with
Hmm.
ones that are nutrient dense, say like a flour made from a nut, like a chestnut flour, an almond flour,
Hmm.
or a bean, like a chickpea flour. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I've been doing, the whole time I've been doing this work, is adding in more brain healthy foods, taking out the ingredients that don't really have any, nutrient virtue, and still making it taste really delicious.
That sounds so fascinating. Okay, so are things like chestnut flour readily available, or do you make them from dried chestnuts? How does that work?
Chestnut flour, not so much, but you can get chickpea flour in any grocery store. It's
Okay.
really inexpensive. I make lots of things with chickpea flour, and also nut flours like almond flour and hazelnut flour or
Mm-hmm.
meal are wonderful to bake with. Another flour I really like is oat flour, and you can buy oat flour, or you can just take whole oats and put them in a blender and whiz them until they're powdery and have your own like really super fresh oat flour.
Oh, that's really neat. Ooh,
Yeah, and
fun.
all of these foods have antioxidants. It's not a matter of being gluten-free. I'm not gluten-free, and I don't advocate being gluten-free unless you actually have celiac disease or
Hmm.
an allergy or sensitivity, which very few people actually have. But it's just that all-purpose white flour and a lot of the other processed flours just don't have any nutrients in them anymore. So I love adding back in these more, there's more bang for your buck, these other
Hmm.
flours. They happen to be
So
gluten-free.
they just happen to be. Okay, so that's really
Exactly.
interesting. And I thought this is so funny. Like I'm Italian descent and everything, but my mother didn't make pasta. There were eight of us, full disclosure, and a
Uh-huh.
grandmother. We all lived together. And the one thing she had tried to make gnocchis, going to go off on a little story here really quick, as a very young bride for her mother, who also had eight children. My father's one of eight, and then we are eight. And she was so embarrassed that they didn't turn out good. And she would always tell us the story that she didn't make gnocchis after that or pasta. Our aunts would make them and we would go have them at Aunt Felicia's house and Aunt Mary's house. But my mom, that was one, she made so many other things, but not pasta. So I'm fascinated with like, okay, to just dive in and try.
Yes, yes. Pasta making for me is something I do over the holidays. It's something that connects me to my roots back in Sicily. It connects me to my ancestors, but it's not something I make. I mean, in Brain Health Kitchen, I try to make recipes that are really easy. You can get on the dinner in like half an hour, like that cod dish you were just talking about. It's
Yeah.
so easy. You just take cherry tomatoes and you heat them up in olive oil until they start to burst into a sauce. And then you add garlic, and then you add a can of chickpeas you've drained. And then once that's all warm and looking kind of saucy and a little bit thicker, you add a little bit of white wine. And then you just lay pieces of cod fillets atop it, and they sort of poach slash steam. And they're ready in about 10 minutes. So that's the kind of dinner that, I really gravitate to now.
Yeah, that's so easy. Yeah. Wow. So what are you really excited about these days? Anything? Uh, I love that question.
At the moment, oh my gosh, we've been talking about Italy so much. At the moment, I'm really excited to be leaving the country in a couple days and
Oh,
going to Italy for a month.
oh, a month.
That a month, yes. So I'm going to be traveling all over the place. So that excites me. After that, I'm going to be cooking in Mexico at a place called Rancho La Puerta. It's a destination wellness spa, and they have a
Ooh.
beautiful cooking school there. And I've been the visiting chef there for about 10 different times.
Oh, really?
And so I'll be there classes for the first time since before the pandemic. It'll be the first in-person classes I've given in a really long time.
Oh, I'm sorry, my phone, it should be, sorry.
That's okay. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I'm really excited about is I'm putting the finishing touches on my manuscript for a book that will be coming out next year.
Oh my goodness. Is there a title yet?
Not quite. It's something along the lines of the Brain Health Kitchen, but we haven't actually released an official title yet.
Is it a cookbook or not a cookbook?
Yes, it's a cookbook.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And it's about brain health, of course. There's a lot of science in it. And I talk about the data behind, the ingredients that I choose and the methods that I choose. But mostly, I created this book to be the kind of book that you pick up and the pictures will draw you in and make you want to cook. And then the recipes hopefully will be very approachable and look easy and delicious. So I want it to be the kind of cookbook that people really use over and over again. That's my goal.
Oh, that sounds right up my alley and so fascinating. Wow. I am really thrilled that you're here. If you could give us another piece of advice, or the best piece of advice for trying to preserve our brains as we go on, what would you tell us?
Well, there's a couple things. We already talked about getting rid of some of the unhealthy oils.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a brain healthy lifestyle, and it includes a lot of the brain healthy foods that, I read a lot about on my website. I can point you to a couple articles, but also avoiding certain things which we know can speed up the aging of your brain. Things like fast food, things like fried food, processed food, packaged food, especially like packaged sweets, like cupcakes, anything that comes from the grocery store that you have to open up a package. There's hydrogenated oils, there's excess sugar, there's not a lot of fiber. So these are all the foods that are very brain harming. So staying away from the brain harming foods is super important. Staying away from sugar sweetened drinks. Like if you could do one thing, like right now, I would say wean off the sugar in your coffee and the sugar in your tea, stop drinking soda pop, just be really, really strategic about the liquids that you drink. Like coffee and tea are incredibly good for you and have lots of brain health nutrients, but all the stuff we put into our coffee and our tea actually takes away from that. So black coffee, plain tea, lots of water, small amounts of alcohol. That's what we mostly should be drinking if we want to drink any alcohol at all. The brain healthy diet includes a small glass of wine every day, but not for people that don't drink. There's not a strong enough association with brain health that you should start drinking alcohol.
Okay.
But if you do drink,
most of us have already started. Yeah.
Exactly. But getting rid of the added sugar in your diet. So when you go to the grocery store and you're looking for yogurt, there's a new line in the nutrition label now that you'll start to see more and more, and it's added sugar. So if you look at your yogurt and you see it has 9 grams of added sugar, that is not something that you want to consume. Because part of the problem with Alzheimer's is that it's reflective of excess sugar in the diet over many years. And if you just overconsume sugar, your body becomes insulin resistant, which can lead to prediabetes or diabetes. And some Alzheimer's experts think of Alzheimer's as a diabetes type 3. We don't really say that anymore because it's more complex than that, but insulin resistance is a really important factor. So this is all to say that the sugar that you consume on a daily basis really has an impact on your brain and your long-term brain health and your risk of getting Alzheimer's later. So I would be very, very strategic about the amount of sugar that you consume.
Okay. I love hearing it from that angle versus what most people come at it from the fat loss angle,
Oh, right. Right. Well, I think it's all about metabolic health. You can be lots of different sizes and be metabolically healthy. But if your insulin is always running high and your blood sugar is always running high, there's a lot of long-term health consequences from that.
Okay.
I mean, there's been many studies done in people at midlife. A lot of these are just women-specific studies too, showing that your dietary and your lifestyle habits at midlife have a huge impact on whether or not you will get dementia later in life. So this midlife time, this ages of like 45 to 65 is really crucial to set up your brain on a healthy aging path.
Wait a minute. Can you just say that again? That is I want everyone to hear that again. Go ahead.
Probably the most crucial time to take care of your brain is between the ages of 45 and 65.
Okay.
And this is when impacts happen with your lifestyle, like how much you exercise, whether or not you can maintain a healthy weight, what kind of foods you consume, how much sugar you take in, whether or not you have, borderline high blood pressure and how well that's controlled. All of these factors have been extensively studied. And it's an important time of life for people to really be aware that this is the golden opportunity to take care of your brain. Once you're 75, 85, 95, there's still things you can do for sure, but it's not nearly as impactful as when you do them in earlier age groups.
Wow, that is, I had no idea actually, but I'm so glad that you said that and brought that up, especially because, a big amount of the population that we're talking to today is probably in that age range, or I would at least say the middle 50% probably is. And so it's good for
Well,
us
that's
to know.
wonderful. I mean, we
Yeah.
used to think that Alzheimer's was something that people got when they got older, like, your grandfather gets it, your grandmother gets it, and they're in their 70s or 80s. And you're like, oh, they just got Alzheimer's. But now what we know is that Alzheimer's is a chronic disease. It starts 20 years before the first symptom. So we are all sort of accumulating abnormal proteins in our brain as we get older, starting in early middle age. And there's
God.
things that we can do to mitigate that.
I just want to apologize only because the reason my ringer's on, I just have to quick apologize. We have twins coming, grandchildren twins. And so I just won't put my phone on silent because I get a little nervous, but it wasn't them. So
That's wonderful.
But anyway, so I apologize for upstaging you, but gosh, this has been so packed with simple things that we can do. And there's so much more. I will tell people to follow you on Brain Health Kitchen on Instagram. That's your main account. And also to go to your
Yes.
website.
Correct.
Okay. And
yes,
also
and I also have a newsletter that's free. People can sign up on Instagram or the website. And I send out a monthly letter. It has recipes in it that are unique for newsletter subscribers. I also talk about the latest studies that I think are helpful for people to know. And I also let them know where I'm going to be in case they want to come and cook with me.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Gosh, if you ever get to New York, you have to let me know. I'll come find you somewhere in New York State.
I would love to come to New York.
Yeah, you'll have to come back to your roots. Right. Well, your American roots.
I know, it's been a while since I've been.
So thank you very much. It's been an honor to chat with you, and good luck on your trip. I can't wait to see what you're posting on Instagram. Are you going to keep us posted as you go?
I will. I'll probably be taking a bit of a social media break because this is my first vacation in 2 years. But I will be sharing some of the wonderful things from the Mediterranean diet there.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Great. All right. Thank you so very much. Wow, this episode was filled with so many golden nuggets. And I think the biggest lesson that I'm going to take away from this is that what we do in midlife really matters, and that the changes in Alzheimer's actually show up 20 years before the first sign. So honestly, go ahead and take a look at the Brain Health Kitchen website. I'll put it in the show notes, and also on Instagram. I have already looked at so many of her recipes and subscribed to Dr. Annie Fenn's newsletter, and I urge you to do the same. Thank you so much for checking in today. This has been a super exciting episode, and I really thank you for taking the time to listen and share this with some of your midlife friends, because, hey, you know what? None of us want to get Alzheimer's, and now what we're really learning is that it's not a rite of passage. We don't have to get it. And we can eat simply and delicious in the meantime. Amen to that.